Last month, a 51-year-old engineer messaged me at 2 in the morning. He wrote, "I don't understand what just happened. I worked for 25 years, saved consistently, invested on my financial advisor's recommendations, and in 3 weeks I lost nearly 40%. He wasn't wrong because he was ignorant. He was wrong because he didn't understand how the system actually operates, and when the system collapses, even the smart ones die first. Don't think this is some distant hypothetical. The storm is approaching, and this time, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. This isn't a prediction. This is mathematics. Imagine you're standing on the edge of a cliff. Below is a storm that has been silently forming for over a decade, and everyone is pretending it doesn't exist. Harry Dent calls this the bubble of all bubbles. Robert Kiyosaki calls it the everything bubble. And I call it the truth no one dares to face. This isn't your typical market correction. This is a full system reset. Here's the first shock. Many experts predict the S&P could lose 50 to 80%, and the Nasdaq could drop as much as 90%. Sound absurd? It's not. That's the mathematics when leverage is too high and faith is too great. So why is this happening? Here's the shortest, clearest version. It's simple. Debt grows faster than income, which always leads to collapse. Always. No exceptions. Global debt stands at $300 trillion US, 3 times global GDP. Governments borrow more than they can repay. Corporations borrow to buy back stock. People borrow to buy overpriced homes. Investors borrow to pump up crypto, AI, and tech valuations. All of it stacked together creates one massive system. Leverage on top of leverage, borrowing on top of borrowing, illusion on top of illusion. It only takes one small spark, one first domino, and the entire chain collapses. Before I explain the most dangerous element, remember this. Crashes don't destroy wealth, they transfer it. What disappears isn't value. What disappears is who owns it. There are only 2 groups after a crash. Group 1, panicked, liquidated, lost everything. Group 2, fully liquid, disciplined, buying back the world at bargain prices. This video will determine which group you belong to. To understand a crash, you must look inside the system, not at the surface. On the surface, you see stocks falling, real estate declining, headlines screaming panic. But underneath, you see hidden leverage, disguised bad debt, derivatives nobody understands, abnormally low yields, and institutions dangling on cheap debt. In 2008, it was just subprime mortgages. Today, it's sovereign debt plus corporate debt plus household debt plus tech plus real estate plus speculation, all at once. Here's the second shock. The tools that saved us in 2008 are exhausted. 0 interest rates used up. Infinite quantitative easing impossible. Central bank balance sheets too bloated to expand further. This time, nobody can pull you up. Listen carefully to how this impacts you personally. If you invest in AI and tech, you're holding assets with valuations most disconnected from reality in the entire market. If you have a mortgage, when prices drop 30 to 50%, you still owe the full amount while your equity vanishes. If you live on a salary, when credit tightens, companies cut labor first. If you save in a bank, the crash doesn't take your money, but the liquidity crisis does. What you should fear isn't the crash itself. What you should fear is being unprepared when it happens. When a rocket fails, you don't patch it. You disassemble it, analyze it, and redesign from scratch. Finance is the same. There are 3 principles that never fail. 1, debt cannot grow forever. 2, speculation always self-destructs. 3, people always panic when it's too late. If you understand these 3 principles, you see that a crash isn't a disaster. It's the natural reset of the system. Here's what 99% of people never prepare for. Step 1. Delever. Reduce dangerous leverage immediately. If you're using margin, borrowing to invest, or carrying consumer debt, start reducing it now. Step 2. Liquidity. Build a cash reserve covering 6 to 12 months of expenses. Liquidity is oxygen in finance. The crash doesn't kill you. Lack of oxygen kills you. Step 3. Shopping list. Create a list of quality assets including companies with real cash flow, real estate in real locations with real demand, commodities and metals, and technology that solves problems, not technology built on hype. Step 4. Set rules. Buy in layers as prices drop. Don't try to catch the bottom. At -10%, observe. At -20%, begin. At -40%, increase allocation. At -60%, attack. Don't predict the bottom. System beats emotion. Step 5. Psychological firewall. Protect your mind from fear, uncertainty, and doubt, social proof, panicking family members, and fake market news. During a crash, the most dangerous thing isn't the market. The most dangerous thing is your own mind. Not everything dies in a crisis. Here are the 5 asset classes that will survive. First, companies with thick margins and strong cash flow. Not hype, not memes, not AI in everything. Second, real estate with real demand, not speculative Airbnb bubbles. Third, energy plus food plus supply chain. Whatever people cannot stop using survives. Fourth, precious metals. Not glorified as magic, but like a seatbelt in an accident. Fifth, technology solving real problems. AI managing risk, automation increasing efficiency, infrastructure technology. If it creates value, it survives. If it creates hype, it dies. Here's the most important metaphor: the pressure chamber. The financial system is like a sealed airplane cabin. When the cabin loses pressure, passengers don't die from falling. They die from lack of oxygen in the first few dozen seconds. A crash works the same way. You don't die from falling prices. You die from not having liquidity at the right moment. Now picture the next 24 to 36 months. Real estate drops 30 to 50%. Tech falls 60 to 90%. Government bonds lose credibility. Banks tighten credit. Zombie companies go bankrupt. Liquidity evaporates within weeks. But simultaneously, those who prepared can buy assets for the next decade at low prices. Strong companies will swallow the entire market. A new generation of billionaires will emerge from chaos. That's the 2 sides of the reset. Which side you're on depends on today. I want you to remember this. Crashes don't choose victims. People choose whether they are victims. You can't control the market. You can't control the Federal Reserve. You can't control the cycle. But you can control the leverage you carry, the liquidity you hold, the assets you research, and the mind you prepare. And in every crisis throughout history, that's been the difference between those who lost everything and those who started a new era. The storm is coming. Not if, but when. The only question is, when the system resets, will you collapse in panic? Or will you stand with a plan and pick up the assets the whole world is running from? That choice belongs to you, right now. Let me show you what most people fundamentally misunderstand about financial crashes. The media focuses on stock charts, percentage drops, and dramatic headlines, but the real danger lives in the invisible architecture beneath. Think about 2008. Everyone saw housing prices fall, but few understood the derivative chains, the credit default swaps, the tranches of securitized mortgages that turned a housing problem into a global meltdown. The surface showed symptoms. The structure held the disease. Today's structure is exponentially more fragile because it's built on more than a decade of artificial support. Central banks around the world injected trillions into the system, held rates near zero for years, and convinced markets that risk had been eliminated. But risk wasn't eliminated. It was relocated, repackaged, and magnified. Consider what happened during the recent volatility in early 2025. Markets experienced sharp declines. Trillions in market capitalization evaporated within weeks, and liquidity suddenly became scarce. Investors who believed diversification alone would protect them discovered that when everything is leveraged, everything falls together. The correlation approaches 1. Bonds fall with stocks. Real estate falls with equities. Even safe havens stumble when forced selling begins. This is the anatomy of a liquidity crisis, not a valuation crisis. When margin calls hit, when funds face redemptions, when banks pull credit lines, asset holders don't sell what they want to sell, they sell what they can sell. Quality assets get dumped alongside garbage because the system demands cash immediately. Here's what you need to internalize. The next crash won't announce itself with a single clear trigger. It will cascade. A corporate default here, a sovereign debt scare there, a tech company missing earnings, a real estate fund gating withdrawals, a pension fund forced to liquidate. Each event feeding the next until the system reaches critical mass. And because the world is more connected than ever, because algorithmic trading dominates volume, because leverage permeates every corner of finance, the speed will shock everyone. 2008 took months to unfold. The next crisis could devour markets in weeks, possibly days. Your reaction time will be measured in hours, not quarters. Now let's talk about the psychological component, because this separates survivors from casualties more than any financial strategy. When markets crash, your brain enters survival mode. Fear floods your nervous system. You see your account balance dropping and every instinct screams, sell, get out, protect what's left. This is exactly when fortunes transfer from the unprepared to the prepared. The unprepared sell at the bottom, lock in losses, and sit in cash while the recovery passes them by. The prepared buy when blood runs in the streets, when pessimism peaks, when everyone else has capitulated. But to do this, you need more than a plan on paper. You need psychological conditioning. Start building that conditioning now. Visualize the scenario. Imagine seeing your portfolio down 40%. Imagine headlines screaming recession. Imagine friends and family telling you to get out, that it's going to get worse. Now imagine yourself calm, systematic, checking your predetermined buy levels, executing your plan. This mental rehearsal isn't optional. It's the difference between freezing in the moment and acting with clarity. Write down your rules before the crisis. Make them specific. If the S&P falls 25%, I buy this amount of these assets. If it falls 50%, I buy this amount. Remove emotion from the equation by deciding in advance. Let me address a question you might be thinking. What if I'm wrong? What if the crash doesn't come, or comes much later, or is smaller than expected? Here's the truth. Preparing for a crash doesn't hurt you if it doesn't happen. Reducing leverage improves your financial stability regardless. Building liquidity gives you options and peace of mind. Researching quality assets makes you a better investor. Creating psychological discipline serves you in all market conditions. But not preparing, that's asymmetric risk. If you're unprepared and the crash comes, you could lose everything. If you're prepared and it doesn't come, you're simply in a stronger position. The cost of preparation is minimal. The cost of being unprepared is catastrophic. Now let's examine what quality looks like in a post-crash world, because what survives and thrives will redefine the investment landscape for the next decade. Quality means companies that don't need favorable conditions to prosper. They have products or services people need, not want. They have pricing power because they're essential or irreplaceable. They have balance sheets that can weather years of difficulty. They have management that thinks in decades, not quarters. These companies are boring during bull markets. Everyone chases the exciting story stocks, the disruptors, the moonshots. But when the tide goes out, boring becomes beautiful. Cash flow becomes king. Dividends become proof of life. In real estate, quality means properties that serve fundamental needs. Housing in areas with job growth and population stability. Industrial properties supporting logistics and distribution. Medical facilities serving aging populations. Agricultural land producing food. These assets won't escape the downturn, but they'll recover because demand persists. Contrast this with speculative real estate, the luxury condos in oversupplied markets, the vacation rentals dependent on discretionary spending, the commercial properties tied to dying retail. These will get hammered and may never fully recover. For commodities and materials, think about what civilization requires to function. Energy to power homes and transport goods, metals for construction and manufacturing, agricultural products for food. These face cyclical pressure during recessions, but they also benefit from supply constraints and long-term demand trends, and in severe crashes, precious metals often serve as a monetary hedge when faith in currency and government debt wavers. Gold and silver aren't investments in the traditional sense. They're insurance, a way to preserve purchasing power when paper assets fail. Technology deserves special attention because this sector faces the greatest valuation risk, but also holds the greatest transformation potential. The AI boom of recent years created enormous wealth on paper, but much of it rests on future promises rather than current profits. When crashes come, the market stops paying for promises and demands proof. Companies with actual revenue, actual margins, actual competitive moats will survive and eventually thrive. The others will vaporize. If you want exposure to technology post-crash, focus on infrastructure, the companies that provide the tools and platforms others build on. Focus on automation that genuinely reduces costs. Focus on software that solves expensive problems. Avoid hype. Avoid buzzwords. Avoid anything that requires a decade of patience to maybe break even. Here's a framework for thinking about the recovery, because crashes are temporary but the lessons are permanent. Every major crash in history, from 1929 to 2008, was followed by recovery and eventually new highs. But the composition changed. Different companies led. Different sectors dominated. Different investors held the wealth. The reset reshuffled the deck. Those who understood this bought assets when they were hated and held them through the recovery. They didn't try to time the exact bottom. They didn't wait for certainty. They acted when others were paralyzed. Think about the opportunities that will emerge. Entire industries will consolidate. Weak competitors will vanish, leaving stronger players with increased market share. Real estate will transfer from over-leveraged speculators to patient buyers with cash. Talent will become available as layoffs hit. Technology will be deployed more efficiently as desperation forces innovation. In chaos, there is always creation. The question is whether you're positioned to participate. I want to emphasize one more critical point about timing. You cannot predict exactly when this crash will occur. Maybe it starts next month. Maybe it takes 2 years. Maybe something triggers it that nobody is currently watching. But the conditions are in place. The debt levels are unsustainable. The valuations in many sectors defy fundamentals. The complacency is widespread. These are the ingredients. The spark is unknown, but the fuel is stacked high. So your job isn't to predict the spark. Your job is to be ready when it ignites. Start today. Review your leverage. Calculate your liquidity needs. Build your watch list of quality assets. Write down your buying rules. Strengthen your psychological defenses. Talk to your family about the plan so they don't panic when the moment comes. These steps sound simple, but most people won't do them. They'll wait. They'll rationalize. They'll convince themselves it's different this time or that they'll have time to react. And when the crash comes, they'll be the ones sending desperate messages at 2 a.m. asking what happened. The history of markets is the history of cycles, expansion and contraction, greed and fear, leverage and deleveraging. We are deep into an expansion phase built on unprecedented monetary intervention and historic debt accumulation. The contraction will come. It always does. The only variables are timing and magnitude. And while you can't control those variables, you can control your response. You can choose to be a victim of the cycle or a beneficiary of the reset. Picture yourself 2 years from now. In one scenario, you ignored the warnings. You stayed fully invested in overvalued assets. You carried too much debt. When the crash came, you panicked, sold low, and spent years recovering emotionally and financially. In the other scenario, you prepared. You reduced risk. You built liquidity. You researched opportunities. When the crash came, you stayed calm, executed your plan, and acquired assets at generational lows. Now you're positioned for the next decade of growth. Which scenario do you want to live? The storm is coming. The mathematics guarantee it. The timing remains uncertain, but the outcome is inevitable. Debt cannot grow faster than income forever. Speculation cannot sustain valuations indefinitely. Leverage cannot build endlessly, without collapse. These are laws of economics as firm as laws of physics. You can choose to believe the system is different this time, that central banks have solved the cycle, that technology has changed the rules, or you can prepare for reality. I'll leave you with this final thought. Every generation faces a moment that defines their financial future. For some, it was the Great Depression. For others, the stagflation of the 70s or the dot-com crash or the financial crisis of 2008. For your generation, this is that moment. How you prepare in the months ahead will determine your trajectory for decades to come. The choice is yours. The clock is ticking. And when the storm arrives, there will be no time left to prepare, only time to execute or time to regret. Choose wisely. Choose now.